I arrived at the Riverside Convention Center at exactly 6:15 p.m., wearing a black blazer I'd bought on sale 3 years ago and carrying a gift bag with a retirement clock I'd picked up at Target. My 2014 Nissan Altima was parked in the back lot, wedged between a BMW and a Mercedes that made it look like someone's teenage daughter's hand-me-down. The convention center lobby was already filling up. Dad had worked at Harrison Manufacturing for 37 years, starting as a floor supervisor and working his way up to operations director. He knew everyone. Everyone knew him. This retirement party had been planned for months. A woman with a clipboard intercepted me at the door. Name, please. Sophie Matthews. I'm Richard Matthews' daughter. She scanned her list and checked me off. Great. You're at table 12. The family table is table 1, but it sounds like you're. Table 12 is fine, I said quickly. I'd been expecting this. The family table would be Mom, Dad, my brother Kevin with his wife Brittany, and probably a few of Dad's closest work friends. Table 12 would be the overflow. Distant relatives. Plus ones. People who needed to be invited but weren't quite important enough for the main tables. I made my way into the banquet hall. It was decorated with navy blue and silver, Dad's favorite colors. Balloons, banners, a slideshow playing on a screen showing photos from Dad's career. Young Dad in the 1980s with a mullet and safety goggles. Middle-aged Dad shaking hands with clients. Recent Dad at company events, always smiling, always professional. Table 1 was front and center, right next to the podium. I could see Mom already seated there in a burgundy dress, laughing at something Kevin was saying. Kevin looked like he'd come straight from his law firm. Expensive suit, perfect haircut, that practice smile he used with clients. Table 12 was in the back corner near the kitchen doors. I recognized a few faces. Dad's cousin Jim, who I hadn't seen since I was 12. An elderly couple I didn't know at all. A younger guy scrolling through his phone looking bored. I took my seat and pulled out my own phone, checking my emails. 17 unread messages. 3 marked urgent. The most important one was from my attorney. Final paperwork signed. Deal closes Monday 9 a.m. Congratulations on the acquisition. I read it twice, then archived it. Harrison Manufacturing. The company my father had dedicated his entire adult life to. The company where he'd worked every holiday, every weekend, every time they needed someone to step up. The company that was now, as of Monday morning, going to be 60% owned by me. Well, technically owned by Apex Investment Holdings, LLC. But I was Apex Investment Holdings. I was the sole owner, the managing member, the person who'd spent the last 4 months negotiating this deal. And nobody in my family had any idea. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. A man in a suit, I recognized him as Dale Peterson, Dad's boss, was standing at the podium. We're about to get started. People shuffled to their tables. The room settled into expectant silence. Good evening, everyone, Dale said, his voice booming through the speakers. Thank you all for coming tonight to celebrate Richard Matthews and his 37 years of dedicated service to Harrison Manufacturing. Applause filled the room. Dad stood up at table 1, waving modestly. Richard started here in 1987, Dale continued. Fresh out of community college, eager to learn, willing to do whatever it took. He started on the manufacturing floor, and over the years he proved himself to be one of the most reliable, hardworking, and knowledgeable people in this company. More applause. Mom was crying happy tears. He became a shift supervisor, then a floor manager, then operations coordinator, and finally operations director. He's been instrumental in our growth from a regional manufacturer to a national supplier. Richard, we couldn't have done it without you. Dad stood up again, this time walking to the podium. Dale shook his hand and stepped aside. Thank you, Dale, Dad said, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you all for being here. 37 years is a long time. I've spent more waking hours in this building than I have in my own home. Scattered laughter. But it's been worth it, Dad continued. I've built a career here. I've provided for my family. I've made friendships that will last a lifetime. And I'm proud of what we've accomplished together. He paused, looking out at the crowd. I want to thank my wife Linda for supporting me through all the long hours and stressful projects. I want to thank my son Kevin, who followed in my footsteps by building his own successful career, though he had the good sense to become a lawyer instead of a factory guy. Laughter. Kevin stood up and gave a little bow. And I want to thank my daughter, Sophie, Dad said, and my stomach tightened. Who is? Well, Sophie's still figuring things out. Still looking for real work, unfortunately. But we love her anyway. The room went quiet for a beat, then people laughed awkwardly. Sympathetic nods. A few people glanced back at table 12, trying to figure out which one was the disappointing daughter. I kept my face neutral and my phone in my hand. But enough about my family, Dad continued, not noticing or not caring about what he'd just said. Let's talk about this company. He launched into a speech about Harrison Manufacturing's history, the projects he'd been proudest of, the people who'd mentored him. It was a good speech. Heartfelt. Genuine. The kind of speech you'd expect from someone who'd given 37 years to a place. I checked my email again. Another message from my attorney. Mr. Harrison confirmed he'll be at the event tonight. He wants to meet with you briefly to discuss transition timeline. I typed back, confirmed. I'll find him after the speeches. Dinner was served, chicken or fish, standard banquet fare. I picked at my chicken and listened to more speeches. Dale talked about Dad's contributions. The CFO talked about Dad's reliability. A floor manager who'd worked with Dad for 25 years told a funny story about a manufacturing crisis they'd solved together. Around 8 p.m. as dessert was being served, I saw William Harrison enter through the side door. William Harrison was the CEO and majority owner of Harrison Manufacturing. 72 years old, silver hair, sharp eyes. He'd built the company from a small machine shop into a $340 million operation. He was also, as of Monday morning, going to be my business partner. He scanned the room, spotted me at table 12, and started walking in my direction. I stood up to meet him. Ms. Matthews, he said, extending his hand. I'm glad you could make it tonight. Mr. Harrison, I shook his hand. Thank you for taking the time. Of course. This is a significant event. Richard's retirement, the company transition, it all happens together. I nodded, very aware that people at nearby tables were starting to notice that the CEO was talking to the girl from the overflow table. I wanted to confirm our meeting on Monday, Mr. Harrison continued. 9 a.m. sharp. We'll finalize the paperwork, transfer the shares, discuss the management structure going forward. I'll be there, I said. Excellent. And I wanted to say, your vision for the company is impressive. The modernization plans, the new client development strategies, the operational improvements. I'm confident we made the right choice in bringing you on as majority owner. I appreciate that, I said. I'm looking forward to working together. As am I. Oh, and congratulations on the acquisition, Ms. Matthews. 60% is a substantial stake. You'll have significant control over the company's direction. His voice wasn't particularly loud, but it carried. Several people at nearby tables had stopped eating to listen. At table 1, I saw Dad's head turn. He was looking in our direction now, his expression confused. The acquisition papers are ready, Mr. Harrison said, pulling out a folder from his briefcase. I have the preliminary documents here if you'd like to review them before Monday. Just the summary pages. The full contract is at the office. He handed me the folder. I opened it, scanning the contents even though I'd already reviewed everything multiple times. Share purchase agreement. Apex Investment Holdings, LLC. Acquisition of 60% equity stake in Harrison Manufacturing Incorporated. Purchase price, $87 million. Buyer, Sophie Matthews, via Apex Investment Holdings, LLC. Dad was standing now. So was Mom. Kevin had stopped mid-conversation with his wife. Mr. Harrison seemed oblivious to the attention. Your financing came through smoothly, I see. The banks were impressed with your portfolio. Not many people your age have the capital to make this kind of acquisition. I've been building toward it for a while, I said. Clearly. 8 years in commercial real estate, 14 properties, a portfolio worth over $200 million. That's remarkable for someone who's only 31. The room had gone very, very quiet. Mr. Harrison finally seemed to notice. He looked around, saw all the faces turned toward us and gave an awkward laugh. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt the party. Richard, congratulations on your retirement. He called out to my father, who was standing frozen at table 1. You should be very proud. Your daughter is going to do excellent things with this company. Dad's face had gone completely white. Your daughter, someone at table 3 said. Richard's daughter? Yes, Sophie Matthews, Mr. Harrison said, gesturing to me. She's the new majority owner of Harrison Manufacturing. Brilliant investor. Sharp business mind. We're lucky to have her. The silence that followed was absolute. Mom sat down hard in her chair. Kevin's mouth was hanging open. Brittany looked confused, glancing between me and Dad like she was trying to solve a puzzle. There must be some mistake, Dad finally said, his voice hoarse. Sophie doesn't, she's not. Not what? Mr. Harrison looked genuinely confused now. Ms. Matthews has been negotiating this acquisition for 4 months. The due diligence was thorough. The financing is solid. Everything is in order. But she doesn't have that kind of money, Dad said. She doesn't have any money. She works, she does odd jobs, property management stuff. Property management? Mr. Harrison laughed. Richard, your daughter owns 14 commercial properties across 3 states. Her portfolio is valued at over $200 million. She's one of the most successful young investors in the region. I could see Dad trying to process this information. His face went from white to red to a strange gray color. That's impossible, Kevin spoke up. Sophie lives in a crappy apartment downtown. She drives a car that's older than my nephew. He gestured vaguely at me. She shops at Target. I do shop at Target, I confirmed. And yes, I live in a modest apartment and drive an older car. Because I prefer to invest my money rather than spend it on things I don't need. This is insane, Dad said. You're telling me that my daughter who I've been worried about for years, is buying my company? 60% of it, yes, Mr. Harrison said. I'm retaining 40%. Ms. Matthews will be the majority owner and primary decision maker, though we'll work together on major initiatives. Dale Peterson had joined us now, looking between me and Dad with obvious discomfort. Richard, maybe we should talk about this privately. No, Dad said sharply. No, I want to understand this. Sophie, is this true? Did you really buy the company? Yes, I said simply. How? I've been investing in commercial real estate for 8 years, I said. I started with a small rental property I bought with money I'd saved from my first job. I renovated it, rented it out, used the income and equity to finance another purchase. Each property generated revenue that I reinvested. I learned the business. I made smart choices. I built a portfolio. When the opportunity came up to acquire a majority stake in Harrison Manufacturing, I had the capital and the financing relationships to make it happen. Why didn't you tell us? Mom's voice was shaky. You never asked, I said. You assumed I was struggling because I lived modestly. You assumed I was failing because I didn't brag about my success. You never bothered to look deeper. But we're your family, Kevin said. You should have told us. Why? I asked. So you could take credit? So Dad could brag to his colleagues? So you could all suddenly treat me differently? That's not fair, Dad said. Isn't it? I challenged. 10 minutes ago, you told this entire room that I was still looking for real work. You said it like I was an embarrassment. Like I was something to be pitied. Dad flinched. You've spent years making comments about my apartment and my car and my choices, I continued. You've compared me to Kevin at every family dinner. You've made it clear that you think I'm the family failure. And I let you think that because I wanted to see if you'd value me without knowing about my success. And? Dad asked quietly. And now I know you don't, I said. You value achievement. You value appearances. You value success that looks a certain way. But you don't value me. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat awkwardly. Perhaps I should give the family some privacy. No, stay, I said. We should discuss the transition plan anyway. Dad, your pension is secure, by the way. It's part of your retirement package, which I'm honoring in full. Despite what you might think, I'm not trying to punish you. My pension, Dad repeated slowly. My pension depends on the company's financial health, yes, I said. Which is why I'm investing in modernization and growth. I want Harrison Manufacturing to thrive. Not just for my own return on investment, but because it matters to people. It matters to the employees. It matters to the community. And yes, it matters to you. Dale Peterson spoke up. Richard, the company is in good hands. We've been working with Ms. Matthews for months. Her plans are solid. The board is confident. The board knew about this? Dad asked. Of course, Dale said. Major acquisitions require board approval. We've been reviewing the deal since June. And nobody told me? You're retiring, Richard, Dale said gently. We didn't want to burden you with company business during your last few months. We wanted you to enjoy your send-off. Dad sank back into his chair looking stunned. Mr. Harrison patted my shoulder. I'll leave you to your family discussion. Ms. Matthews, I'll see you Monday morning. Thank you, Mr. Harrison. He walked away and suddenly I was standing in front of a room full of people who were all staring at me with various expressions of shock, confusion, and reassessment. I think I need some air, Dad said, standing up abruptly and heading for the door. Mom followed him. So did Kevin. I stood there for a moment, then walked after them. I found them in the hallway outside the banquet room. Dad was leaning against the wall, his face in his hands. Mom was rubbing his back. Kevin was pacing. This is crazy, Kevin was saying. This doesn't make any sense. Sophie she can't just. I did, I said, interrupting. I built a business. I made smart investments. I acquired a company. It makes perfect sense if you'd been paying attention. We weren't paying attention because you never told us. Kevin shot back. I didn't tell you because I wanted to see if you'd treat me with respect even when you thought I had nothing, I said. Turns out you don't. That's not fair, Mom said. We love you, Sophie. Love and respect aren't the same thing, I said. You love me, sure. But you don't respect me. You've never respected my choices. You've spent years making comments about how I need to get serious about my career, how I need to think about my future, how I'm not living up to my potential. Because we were worried about you. Mom said. No, you were embarrassed by me, I corrected. There's a difference. You were embarrassed that I didn't fit your image of success. That I drove an old car and lived in a small apartment and didn't have a fancy job title. You cared more about how I looked to your friends than about who I actually was. Dad finally looked up. I didn't know. How could I have known if you didn't tell me? You could have asked, I said. You could have been curious about my life instead of dismissive. You could have taken an interest in what I was actually doing instead of assuming I was failing. I'm your father, Dad said, his voice breaking. I'm supposed to guide you, to help you. How can I do that if you're keeping secrets? I didn't need your guidance, I said bluntly. I built this on my own. Without your help. Without your advice. Without your approval. And honestly, I'm proud of that. So this is about proving something? Kevin asked. About showing us we were wrong? No, I said. This is about building something real. The fact that it also proved you wrong is just a side effect. We stood in silence for a long moment. Your pension is secure, I said to Dad. So is your health insurance. So are the pensions of every other employee at Harrison Manufacturing. I'm not buying the company to strip it down or make quick profits. I'm buying it because I see its potential. Because I want to grow it. Because I believe in what it does. And what about our relationship? Mom asked quietly. Where does that fit into your plans? I looked at her, at the tears in her eyes, at the genuine confusion on her face. That depends on you, I said. I don't need you to be impressed by what I've accomplished. I don't need you to brag about me to your friends. I just need you to respect me. To treat me like I matter. To value me for who I am, not for what I've achieved. We do value you, Dad said. Then prove it, I said. Not tonight. Not with apologies or explanations. But over time. Show me that you respect me even when you don't understand my choices. Show me that I matter to you without needing to be successful first. I turned to walk back toward the banquet hall. Sophie, Dad called after me. I'm sorry. For what I said in there. About you still looking for real work. That was cruel. Yes, it was, I agreed. But at least now you know the truth. I went back inside. The party had resumed, though people were clearly still processing what had happened. I returned to table 12, finished my dessert and made polite conversation with Dad's cousin Jim, who wanted to know all about real estate investing. Around 10 p.m. as people were starting to leave, Kevin found me. Can we talk? He asked. We walked outside to the parking lot. I've been an ass, Kevin said without preamble. For years. I've looked down on you. I've compared your life to mine and felt superior. I've made jokes at your expense. I'm sorry. Hey, I said. Just okay. What do you want me to say? I asked. That it's fine? That it didn't hurt? It did hurt. You're my brother. Your opinion mattered to me. And you used that to make yourself feel better by making me feel worse. Kevin nodded slowly. You're right. And I'm sorry. I appreciate the apology, I said. But it's going to take more than words to rebuild trust. I know, he said. I'm willing to do the work if you are. We'll see, I said. I got in my Nissan Altima and drove home to my modest apartment downtown. It was small, just a one-bedroom, but it was in a great location and the rent was reasonable. I'd bought the building it was in 4 years ago, so technically I was paying rent to myself, which made the whole thing even more economical. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Please call me when you get home. We need to talk about this properly. I typed back, tomorrow. Let's all have coffee and discuss this calmly. Mom, okay. I love you, sweetheart. Me, love you too. The next morning I met my parents and Kevin at a quiet cafe downtown. Not anywhere fancy, just a local place with good coffee and comfortable chairs. Dad looked like he hadn't slept. Mom's eyes were red. Kevin seemed subdued. I've been thinking about what you said, Dad started. About respect. About how we treated you. And you're right. We were dismissive. We made assumptions. We didn't ask questions. We thought we knew what success looked like, Mom added. And when you didn't fit that picture, we decided you were struggling. We never considered that maybe you were just building something different. Why did you keep it secret? Kevin asked. I'm still trying to understand that part. Because I needed to know if I mattered to you without the achievement, I said. If family was more important than status. If you'd value me even when you thought I had nothing. And we failed that test, Dad said quietly. Yes, I agreed. You did. Can we make it up to you? Mom asked. Is there a way to fix this? I don't know, I said honestly. Maybe. But it's going to take time. You need to understand that my worth isn't tied to my net worth. That I'm valuable because I'm your daughter, not because I own a company. We understand, Dad said. And we'll do better. I promise. We talked for over an hour. Not about the company or the money, but about how we'd communicate going forward. About respect and assumptions and the ways families hurt each other without meaning to. As we were getting ready to leave, Dad said, I do have one question about the company. Okay. Your plans for modernization. The new equipment, the client development, the operational improvements. That's going to require significant capital investment. About $23 million over the next 3 years, I confirmed. I've already secured financing. And you think it'll work? You think you can grow the company? I know I can, I said confidently. Harrison Manufacturing has good bones. Strong reputation. Solid client base. He just needs to evolve. Embrace new technology. Expand into new markets. I've done this with other businesses. I know what works. Dad nodded slowly. Then I think the company's in good hands. Thank you, I said. That means a lot coming from you. Over the next few weeks, things slowly shifted. Dad stopped making comments about my car or my apartment. Mom started asking about my actual work instead of assuming I was struggling. Kevin invited me to lunch just to talk, no agenda. On Monday morning, I arrived at Harrison Manufacturing at 8:45 a.m. for the closing meeting. I was wearing a professional suit this time. Armani, purchased specifically for this occasion. First impressions matter, especially when you're about to become majority owner of a $340 million company. Mr. Harrison was already in the conference room with the attorneys and board members. We spent 2 hours going through paperwork, signing documents, transferring shares, discussing transition timelines. At 11:07 a.m. the deal officially closed. I owned 60% of Harrison Manufacturing. Welcome to the team, Ms. Matthews, Mr. Harrison said, shaking my hand. I look forward to working with you. Likewise, I said. Let's build something great. That afternoon I toured the facility. Met the managers. Talked to employees. Learned about current projects and challenges and opportunities. I saw the floor where Dad had spent 37 years working. The office where he'd planned operations. The break room where he'd had lunch with colleagues who'd become friends. It was a good company. Solid company. A company that had meant something to my father and to hundreds of other employees who'd built their lives around it. And now it was mine to steward. Mine to grow. Mine to improve. Not because I wanted to prove something to my father, but because I saw its potential. That evening, Dad called me. I talked to Dale today, he said. He told me about your meeting. Said you impressed everyone. Said you knew exactly what needed to be done. I've been studying the company for months, I said. I don't make investments without understanding what I'm buying. I know that now, Dad said. I should have known it before. Yeah, I agreed. You should have. Sophie, I want you to know, I'm proud of you. Not because you bought the company. Not because you're wealthy. But because you had the discipline and vision to build something real. Because you did it on your own terms. Because you stayed true to yourself even when we couldn't see it. I felt tears prickling at my eyes. Thank you, Dad. That means everything. I'm sorry it took me so long to say it, he said. I'm sorry I needed proof before I could see your worth. I'm sorry I kept secrets, I said. Even if I had my reasons, it wasn't fair to you. We both made mistakes, Dad said. But maybe we can do better going forward. I'd like that, I said. 3 months later, I attended the annual Harrison Manufacturing Company dinner. It was tradition. Every year the company hosted a formal dinner for all employees and their families. This year I was seated at the head table as the new majority owner. Dad and Mom were there too at a table near the front. Dad was officially retired now, but he'd been invited as a guest of honor. I gave a speech about the company's future, about our modernization plans, about my vision for growth and sustainability. I talked about honoring the legacy that people like my father had built while also embracing innovation and change. When I finished, the room erupted in applause. Dad stood up and started clapping. Then he walked to the front of the room and hugged me. I'm proud of you, he whispered. Not as your employer. As your father. I know, I whispered back. And that's what I needed to hear. I still drove my 2014 Nissan Altima. Still lived in my modest apartment. Still shopped at Target. Because those choices weren't about being broke. They were about understanding the difference between wealth and worth. I'd built a $200 million portfolio by living below my means and investing the difference. I'd acquired a $340 million company by being patient, strategic, and disciplined. And I'd finally earned my family's respect by showing them that success doesn't always look the way they expect. My phone buzzed with a text from Kevin. Dinner this weekend? Brittany wants to hear more about your real estate investments. And I promise, no more jokes about your car. I smiled and typed back. Sounds good. But I'm picking the restaurant. Kevin, let me guess, somewhere with a good value menu? Me, obviously. Why waste money on overpriced food when I could be buying another property? Kevin, face with tears of joy. Never changed, Sophie. But I had changed. Not in my spending habits or my lifestyle choices. But in my willingness to let my family see who I really was. And slowly, carefully they were learning to see me too. Not as the daughter who was still figuring things out. But as the woman who'd figured it out years ago. And built an empire while they weren't paying attention.